What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Lexalexus. Today it is the biggest video of the whole championship season. It's the one everyone waits for. It is your official 22-23 predictions from yours truly. I am a little bit more nervous than normal actually doing these predictions this year. So in context, last year I did quite well. I got 3 teams in the correct position last year. Also, I did a video where I was comparing my predictions with a lot of really top intellectual YouTubers in terms of their predictions. Basically, if you got a space wrong, that was 1 point, and the least points you get, the better your score is. If you saw the video, you'll know I came second place overall, beating the likes of Ben HD, Matt SB, Benjamin Bloom, both of the second tier podcast men, Blackburn Roverseas, beating all of those people. So now I feel like an extra element of pressure to deliver a similar table of success or even better. So I'm going to do my very, very best, but I'm guaranteeing it's not going to be fully spot on. And a few disclaimers. This table is purely based on what the squads look like now. That could all change with transfer windows, injuries and loan markets, how teams are going to use that. So those 3 factors ultimately are out of my control, and I'm only just predicting what might happen in all 3 of those departments, which is going to coincide with my table. If you guys like what you see, please give the video a like. It does tremendously help the channel. Please do hit the subscribe button if you do enjoy this content and you want to see more championship content. It really helps grow the channel. Please also share the channel too. All of that really helps. But without any further ado, we're going to go straight into it. Let's reveal my Championship 22-23 table predictions. Coming in at last place in the table, and a lot of people are predicting this, but we are predicting Rotherham to finish in last place. And it's nothing against Rotherham. I really, really like Paul Warne as a manager, and I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself from 2 years ago when I also had predicted Rotherham to get relegated. In fact, Rotherham I've got a huge amount of respect for because they were one of the very few teams I actually got in the correct position 2 years back. But going into this season, they had a really good unbeaten run in League One at the early part of the season, but when they actually narrowly scraped past Sutton in the EFL Trophy final, which they did narrowly win, they really have not looked like the same club ever since, and were actually really struggling, and at one stage looked like that they wouldn't get automatically promoted. Ultimately, a 2-0 win against Gillingham on the final day of the season, which sent them down, but also sent Rotherham up back to the Championship. So ultimately, it is another repetitive season of one season in the Championship and then one in League One. They are the Championship yo-yo team. Are they going to break that curse finally and stay within more than one season in the Championship? For me, the reason why I got them to go down is that I just don't think they've got a recognised goal scorer that's Championship quality. They've sold their top 2 goal scorers. They've sold Michael Smith and Freddie Ladapo, who have both contributed to over 40% of Rotherham's goals there, and both have just been going away to League One rivals right now, which is a real shame and a real waste, I think, of their talent as well. Michael Ikweke, their best defender, statistically in my opinion, has also left to join a League One club as well in Sheffield Wednesday. And right now, their squad, I think, has got a couple of decent players. They've recently got Grant Hall in from Middlesbrough, which I think will be a decent signing. I think Johansson's not a terrible goalkeeper. I think Cohen Bramall could be a potential wild card. You know, I know what he's like when he briefly played for Colchester. And Connor Washington, their new striker, has scored a couple of goals in pre-season. But overall, I just don't think Rotherham are going to score enough goals. They actually were one of the lowest scoring teams within the top 6 of League One. And when you compare that to the Championship, it's a whole different kettle of fish. So I'm sorry, Rotherham fans. I'm predicting Rotherham to get relegated. Coming in at 23rd place, in my opinion, is Birmingham. Now, I feel really bad for Birmingham putting them in 23rd place because I do really like John Eustace. I really like him a lot. I actually think he is a great manager with a lot of potential there. But I just think he's come at the wrong time because Birmingham right now is not looking like the most attractive club to go to right now, especially with the takeover controversies and issues that they're having. If it does go through, at what extent are they going to spend money as well? We don't see new ownerships, spend money straight away as well, and that could come at a really costly time for them. I just think they've had a bit of bad luck, and I do think the chaos that they have behind the scenes, I think will affect them, going forward as well. With their strikers, you're looking at Hogan, Jukovic, and Deeney, where all three of them are not the youngest of strikers anymore. They have let a couple of people go there. And in terms of their transfers, they've not got many people in for my liking. I like they got John Ruddy. He could potentially be alright. And maybe Trusty from Arsenal could be a bit of a wild card. Placheta may be an alright impact player. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a good player that will get 10 out of 10 performances every day, though. And for me, I do think they're lacking goals in terms of their quality of strikers, but also at the back, they were horrendous last year, conceding so many goals. They had one of the worst setups, and if that's not worked on, and especially if Eustace is still trying to tweak things, in terms of a first team job, this is the first thing he's really doing since Kidderminster Harriers, back down into the National League North. And this is a completely different kettle of fish, as I'm going to repeat again from talking about Rotherham's goal scoring problems. So for me, I just think it feels a bit too ambitious for me. So I feel like Birmingham are eventually going to get relegated after, I think it's 7 seasons in a row where they've not finished above 17th place. I mean, it's a really depressing drop, isn't it, from Birmingham that were in the Premier League, around 15 years ago, which I think is really, really sad for them. Coming in the final relegation spot is Reading. Now, this was really close. Honestly, the next two teams, were really marginally ahead of Reading. Now, the reason why I think Reading will go down, I just think at the moment their squad, I think, is a little bit more equipped compared to the other two teams in Birmingham and Rotherham. I do think they've got a lot more potential goals in them for the fact they've still got Ajaria, Meite and Lucas João, in their forward areas there. But the biggest issue with them is their constant injury problems, because the thing is with João, let's say for example, he was only there for half the season. In the first half he was non-existent where Reading were really struggling, and then he played a little bit of a good part when Paul Ince did come in and scored a couple of goals there as well. But right now I do think they do need a couple more signings. They've also got Shane Long, actually, I forgot to mention that he could potentially score a couple of goals, but he is definitely not one of the youngest players anymore, at least. And I feel like that for me is a little bit of a sentimental, nostalgic signing for me. Joe Lumley, I don't think is the best choice of goalkeeper they could have gone for, but considering the FFP regulations that Reading have had with their transfers, they've had to really sign players very, very carefully. And considering the circumstances, I felt they were a little bit forced, with those signings, that they've got right now. I think Fornah, is a decent player they actually managed to get, considering with the circumstances that they've got. But as a whole, I think defensively there'll be an issue. But I feel like Reading will be the more likely team out of the bottom three who could get themselves out of this because of the goals. And Paul Ince, I'm not really too convinced of him still as a manager. So overall, I just think it's more negatives outweighing the positives, and it's just resulted in me picking Reading to go down, but I would not be surprised if they somehow prove me wrong. Coming up next in the table is Blackpool, right down in 21st. It's a 5-place drop considering they finished in 16th place last season. They lost, I felt, the biggest reason of their success last year, and that was their manager Neil Critchley. He has decided to shockingly depart from Blackpool and join Aston Villa's, assistant coach with Steven Gerrard, ultimately replacing the position Michael Beale left. So that whole managerial scenario has thrown a very interesting conundrum in a couple of Championship clubs. And I feel the circumstances of how shocking it was, I think, may have thrown a couple of things off. Michael Appleton wasn't necessarily a popular choice with fans as well. He is Blackpool's shortest serving manager, quitting after only 11 games in charge. But he has got a point to prove. I felt he has improved his managerial CV with the success he's had with Lincoln. But having said that, I think here he's going to find this a little bit tricky. I feel like they will continue to use the loan market. For instance, getting the likes of Reece Williams and Luz Fiorini, from Liverpool, Manchester City's youth squad. So I expect Blackpool to still use the loan market, and I think if they get one or two couple really decent loans in, it might just edge the bottom three slightly. And I feel like Josh Boland, CJ Hamilton are going to be the two players that they cannot let go, really. Maybe not too much of a blow if one or the other goes, especially if they do, as I say, continue to use the loan market. But as of right now, I do think that score could be coming in short. They did really well, to even finish 16th with the budget they had. But I think this one's going to feel a little bit more of a reality bite. And I think they will finish in 21st and have a pretty tumultuous season, personally. Next on the list is Wigan. This one is very interesting, I feel, because a lot of people are, I feel, going to predict very different things. I mean, for what I think people may either predict Wigan to do very well, and I feel like either to get relegated. I don't think there'll be any in between. As I said, I've not seen any predictions before this, just so I don't get influenced otherwise. But for me, I feel that Wigan will be okay, but I don't think they're going to necessarily kick on yet. I think they do find quality short in some areas. I think their attack could potentially be a sticking point. Will Keane, he's done well in League One. Will he step up to the Championship? I'm not sure. Callum Lang, I think, will be an interesting player going into the Championship as well. They've got some decent players in around the pitch, and I definitely think they've built a really decent squad on their hand, but is it going to fall short on what it feels like that they're capable of? I do feel it's going to take a little bit of time. I wouldn't even be surprised if they find themselves in the relegation zone for most of the season, but then uprising form or maybe a couple of loan signings could potentially push them up. And for me, I can't predict Wigan any higher based on the lack of transfer activity personally. So I'll say 20th, but definitely could prove me wrong if they decide to do some transfer business in the next couple of days. Next on the list is Huddersfield. Now, I'm really nervous to predict Huddersfield this year, and this prediction is either going to do one of two things. It's either going to make me look like that I've not learned from my mistakes, where Huddersfield made me look very silly last year, getting their prediction wrong by 17 places, and they do really well again, or they will have a drop off and I will basically, actually predict them to finish in a really good place this time. Because personally, I felt that it really couldn't have been a worse pre-season for Huddersfield, really, to be honest. Not only with results, but just the circumstances, the players that they lost. I felt like with their success, eventually Lewis O'Brien was going to leave. And the fact that Harry Toffolo's also left as well for how good he is with his set pieces and his fullback role, I think those are two really bad blows for Huddersfield. I've really got to be honest. Schofield as a manager, very inexperienced, completely inexperienced, and we've seen these managers before in their first season. Some do alright and some just don't do well at all, and they need a full season to get things sorted, and I think that's going to be one of those seasons for Huddersfield. They've done well to get Aneurin back. I know he didn't play too much because he got injured for when he was at loan in January, but now they've got him for a full season. I think Aneurin would do pretty well. They've got a great goalkeeper in Nichols still in goal. I was expecting him to be linked with a couple of moves away. They've got a couple of good players in League One in Rudoni and Kasumu. I think could be quite decent shouts as well. So overall, I don't necessarily think Huddersfield have done a terrible job with their transfer business, but I do think the quality has gone down a little bit. They've still got Sorba Thomas still. 19th may be a little bit harsh for Huddersfield, but I just think it's going to be a little bit of a hangover. We saw Barnsley have that playoff hangover. They lost their manager. They lost a great player in Alex Moa. Huddersfield, they lose Corberan and they lose a great players like Toffolo and, of course, Lewis O'Brien. And I do think it'll be a similar effect, but I don't think it will result in Huddersfield getting relegated, however. So I'm predicting them to finish 19th. But really, if Huddersfield really make me look silly again, I'm going to stop predicting Huddersfield because they're always stitching me up. Coming in 18th place in the table is Sunderland. So they are the best performing team out of the three newly promoted League One teams, in my opinion. Likewise with Wigan, I do think they've got potential, but I just don't think it'll be this season when they kick on. Personally, what edges Sunderland from Wigan for me was, for one, I think Sunderland's form was much stronger at this later stage of the season, and I do think that great momentum may carry that, with their first couple of games. I think they've got a better manager in Alex Neil, And they've made a little bit more business as well, getting Daniel Ballard in. I think is a great signing. Ayese could be a decent signing as well. Jack Clark, we've seen what he can do with Leeds United, so maybe he'll do the same thing with Sunderland as well. I do think they are missing a couple of ingoings personally. I was very surprised Luke O'Nien stayed at the club, but he is still a Sunderland player. Ross Stewart will be interesting at this level. Alex Pritchard is back in the Championship as well. So I definitely think the squad's very well equipped. I just think it's still a little bit short in some areas. I definitely think another striker to rival Stewart and maybe more midfield options as well. But I do think Sunderland will be steady in this season and potentially could kick on really, really well next year, in my opinion. Next on the list is Cardiff. I mean, it hasn't a team transformed their squad like Cardiff. I don't think any team has. And I've said that this is going to be the toughest set of predictions that I'm ever going to do. Basically, a lot of the mid-table this year are going through a transition stage, either with a new manager with a full season or a completely changed squad. And Cardiff runs the exception of having a brand new manager pretty much still and a completely new squad, it feels like, making 12 signings, which is insane for a Championship club to make those many signings. And a couple of them I think are really good. Kipre, I think, is a great signing there. I also think some really good signings include Rina Motta. Sawyers, I think they're a little bit decent there. Cheoja, I think, could be quite decent. So I definitely think they made some decent signings. I don't think all of their signings, I think, are going to hit the ground running per se. And I do think because of the time I think it will take for those signings to implement and link well, that is why I can't predict Cardiff any higher. But if it does go well and they stick with Steve Morris, of which I'm still a little bit apprehensive, but I have acknowledged that I think he's done more good than bad with this Cardiff team. They definitely are playing better football, and I think transitioning from the old McCarthy, Warnock style and Harris style to the Steve Morrison style will take some time, and I think eventually they will start to get a little bit more consistency, and I definitely think they've got a deeper squad. So I do think Cardiff will slightly improve, but based on the amount of players that get in, I think they're going to need at least one season to just kind of get things going. Coming up next in my predictions is Blackburn Rovers, another team going through a bit of a transitional stage because of a new manager they've got. John Dahl Tomasson coming in from his success, I would dare say, with Malmo. He managed to win the Swedish title with them and managed to knock out Rangers from the Champions League qualifiers, which I think was a pretty decent result for Tomasson at the time and his Malmo team. I think the difference we're going to see though is the fact that Tomasson's not managed in English football before, so I think it will take him time to adapt. And there's a lot of uncertainty with players. They've already lost Joe Watford, that contributed to a lot of goals last year. Ben Brereton Diaz could be a really big blow if they do lose him, especially this late in the transfer window as well, and they won't get a great replacement in. For me, Blackburn definitely need one other attacking player in, just to make me feel a little bit more comfortable that they will supply some goals if they do lose one of their main talismans there. Bradley Datt's going to need a really, really big season. Tyrese Dolan will be chipping in here and there as well. And I think their backline is also going to have a big season as well. So a lot of players are going to have to step up, which potentially could be a big test for a lot of this team. And I feel Tomasson is going to be a little bit of a wild card. He can either be a really big hit at first, or he could really, really struggle. I don't think there's any in between. And for me, I'm going for the slightly latter, but I think based on the circumstances, I think it's going to be quite tricky for Tomasson to get things right away. Coming in at 15th place in my table is Stoke City. Now, not many people like predicting Stoke, neither do I. They are a really tricky team to predict. Ironically, last year was actually one of the closest I actually got to Stoke predicting them correctly, only getting them wrong by one position. I've predicted them last year to finish 15th, and I'm doing the exact same thing there. So is it going to be the third time I make this mistake? But for me, I do think the teams above them, I think, are a little bit more equipped based on what they've got in their arsenal. But also, I feel Stoke still are feeling like a team that are just not consistent enough. Last year they were flirting with the top six, and I think we'll see the same thing again. But they fall away, whether it's an injury crisis or I couldn't even explain. Some asteroid goes on the pitch and all of a sudden they lose their momentum and form. just something always gets in the way in here. Mentality. And I think that's a really big problem with Stoke. And I don't think Michael O'Neill has personally dealt that very well. And I do think questions will be asked of Michael O'Neill if he cannot get Stoke to improve. You know, we're approaching 5 seasons now of League One for Stoke, and they've not been in the top half of the table and have not finished there. So they really, really need to have a big season. And personally, if we have another season of this, I think Michael O'Neill will be moved on, and they really need to think something different. I mean, they got Dwight Gale in, which I think is a really big signing for them, a bit of a statement signing. Whether he's going to score the bucket load of goals he did previously, especially at West Brom and Newcastle in the Championship, I don't think he'll score the same level because he's had a big period of him not playing a lot of football. But I definitely think he will be someone that improves Stoke's goal scoring, you know, because that was a big problem with them last year. So definitely okay signings, and I definitely think they may prove me wrong and actually finish higher than their 14th place finish from last year. But personally, I just have this nagging inconsistency with Stoke, and for me, I think they'll finish in around the same place. Coming in at 14th place is Hull City. My God, are they going to be a tricky team to predict? Because we're talking about teams going through a transitional phase. Hull are going through the complete transitional phase. Shota Alvarez is going to have his first full season as a manager, and they've got brand new ownership, which is already new in itself. And because of this, they are completely changing their squad. And have made a couple of ambitious signings as well, which I think will be really, really interesting. Tufan, I think, is interesting. Jean-Michel Seri in the midfield, I think, is a fantastic move for Hull to get him. And they managed to get Alahar back from his loan deal as well. They managed to get him permanently now. So I think Hull are going in the right direction. I just, you know, Hull could either be right round flirting with top 6 or fighting relegation, because I'm still not too sure of Alvarez. If things go well, they'll be fighting top 6 for sure. If things get sour and they are going to potentially struggle to replace the voids that Lewis Potter and George Honeyman are going to make, then it could go really, really wrong. So 14th place, it is 8 places, you know, from distance from the last relegation place, and it's also 8 places below the final playoff place. So it's literally bang slap in the middle of the last relegation place and the last top 6 place. So that is how undecided I am with Hull. They're literally going to be right in the middle, just so that if any one of them happens, it's completely damage limitation for my predictions. Coming in 13th place, just below the top half, is Queen's Park Rangers. Now, a big reason why I think they will drop is basically the inexperience of Michael Beale as a first team manager. That's in short pretty much why I think they're going on a drop. But it doesn't mean that I don't think they will do well. I actually think they will do alright under Michael Beale. And I feel like with a lot of these transitional teams, I think a great example for me to show is like what Swansea were like last year. You know, it's going to be really tough for them to get rid of the style that they had, and manager will be trying things, and then eventually when it all clicks, they'll start getting their form. And I think QPR may do that. I've got to be honest. I think they will start quite slow, but with the players that they've got in, I definitely think that they definitely could rely on them with their individualistic abilities there. The likes of Ilias Chair, the likes of Chris Willock. Think of the fact that you now got Tyler Roberts, you know, potentially as competition for the striker's position. Taylor Richards as a decent shout as well, you know, and signing that they made. Clark Salter at the back, I think, is decent as well. Personally, I do think they will lack goals. I think their striker position is the weakest, got to be honest. So right now, if they really get a good striker in, had they got Dwight Gale, then I definitely would have pushed QPR right into the top up, but they didn't. And personally, I think that might hold them back, and I do think Michael Beale trying a couple of things. Their pre-season was a little bit icky for me, so I'm going to predict QPR in 13th place, but I wouldn't be surprised if they prove me wrong. We now enter the top half. In 12th place is Preston. A very small improvement for Preston. But you've got to say, you know, since Ryan Lowe's come in, he's really improved Preston. And actually, when he came in, the form book for Preston, you know, they're around, you know, in the top 10, actually, Preston, you know, when Ryan Lowe came in with his form. So I do think it will be an improvement, especially that they won't have the manager incapability of Frankie McAvoy now holding them back. I definitely think if they made more transfers, I definitely would feel a bit more confident in their improvement. I think Woodman in goal is a great signing, a really good signing, and could really be one of the signings of the window. Brady, I think, is an alright signing. He's not got too many years left in him, but I do think the experience he's had with Norwich and with Bournemouth, I think, could help Preston there. Woodburn, a bit of a wild card signing there. Overall, I think their squad can have potential. The fact they've still got Johnson and Emil Rees, who's going to have a really big season up front now. But for me, I still think they would not be consistent enough. I think it's going to be the lack of consistency. And potentially, if Emil Rees picks up an injury, I think they will struggle with goals as well. So, with those two scenarios, I can't predict Preston any higher. But I definitely think it will be a little bit more of an exciting season for Preston. Coming in at 11th place is Bristol City. Now, this one is a potential big risk for me because based on Nigel Pearson's points per game, when he has been a manager for Bristol City for quite a few seasons now, you don't really suggest his 1.6 points per game, with a team that should be around in 11th place. But I am really impressed actually with how choosy, if that's the right word, they've been with their signings. They've not made too many signings, but they've made the appropriate signings in the appropriate positions. Their defence was ultimately shambolic. They conceded, I think it was the third most goals in the league, and they addressed it immediately, getting two great defenders in Cal Naismith, who was in a Luton Town team and was considered to be in the team of the season in the back line as well. And Bristol City going for 4-3, which is great business. And also that they managed to get Kane Wilson in, the right back from Forest Green Rovers, who was in a League 2 promotion winning side there. So I definitely think both of them will be a step up in the back line there. And the fact they kept the likes of Semenyo, who was heavily linked. I'm very surprised Semenyo is still in the club. They've got Vyman still, they've got Martin. I think those three linked together fantastically well. Hence why I think Vyman was right up there actually in terms of the conversation of the top goal scorer at one stage. So I think for me, if all three of them click in terms of the front three players and the defence improves things, they recently got a clean sheet and beat Bournemouth by 1-0. So if they continue this great momentum and form into the season, I think they will improve things. But I think right now, not quite enough improvement for a top 6 position in my opinion though. Coming in at 10th place for me is Coventry City. Now, 10th place would be an unbelievable achievement based on the budget and the squad value that they've got. It will be an incredible achievement and it will be another 2-place improvement for Coventry. And there seems to be a really good system going on with Coventry right now. It does feel very similar to Luton, where they're just building upon season by season and are determining not to reach their peak. And I think Coventry have definitely shown that with the signings that they made, getting Jonathan Panzo in, which I think is decent. Doyle, I think, who was a pretty decent signing. He did quite well when he played in Sunderland last year. They also managed to get Casey Palmer in. Don't really know about that, to be honest. But they still have the likes of Gustavo Hamer and Callum O'Hare and Victor Gyökeres. Those three are still in the club. If any one of them leaves, then I would probably drop Coventry down a couple of places, but they're still there, all those three players. And if anything, if all three of them stay, they could even improve 10th place for me. So Coventry's one right on the knife's edge for me, but I've just about compromised that. I think they will improve. I think they are good enough to be a top half team and potentially flirt with playoffs. But for me, not quite having enough depth and consistency to get into that top 6 personally, in my opinion. But I think 10th place would be a great finish for Coventry fans. Coming in at 9th place in the table is Millwall. So practically no change for Millwall in terms of my predictions there. We are predicting them to be in and around that same region, that they finished last year personally. And I think a big part of that is that I just think they're a really decent team. I really think, even with the signings they got in as well, 2 underrated bit of businesses is the Leeds duo of Jamie Shackleton and Charlie Cresswell. I think both of them can make a great impact in that squad there. I'm really impressed with the signing of George Honeyman as well in that midfield position. And Zian Fleming, I think, could be a really good signing as well. Definitely a little bit of a star player. It's just whether he can get used to this league quickly enough. And he did look pretty good in pre-season, so maybe Millwall will kick on pretty quickly. For me, I do think Rarrett at times could be a bit conservative, and potentially would probably draw one too many games. Millwall do tend to draw a lot of games, which holds them back. They don't lose many games, and in fact, if we're basing off home records, they would have been up there in the top 3 in the league. But unfortunately, I do think if they weren't so conservative away from home, and if they improve their away form, they will be up there. But for me, I do think it'll feel like a very similar deja vu like of a season. And for me, I think they'll finish in 9th place. But, for Mill to even finish that high, Rarrett's doing an incredible job with this Mill squad. Coming into 8th place off the table is Luton Town. Let's hope they don't have a goalkeeping crisis this time. They've made 2 goalkeeping signings in Matt Macey and Ethan Horvath. I do think it's got a decent crop of players. They have lost a good amount of that squad too, but they've also gained a good amount of it as well. When they lost Cal Naismith, I was very nervous. I won't lie. Big player in their squad that they lost. But they replaced very well. They got Luke Freeman in, Alfie Doughty, which I think is 2 interesting signings, especially Freeman. I think he could potentially be a good player there. And Woodrow and Morris coming in, I think will definitely sort out their attacking problems as well. I think Luton are going to have another great season, and I nearly, actually put them down quite a couple of places, but then I remind myself for how well their original squad did and what they've done to improve it. And I've got to say, Luton are definitely going to be thereabouts again, personally, and I'll be very surprised if they're not. I just think that's fall slightly below top 6 in my opinion, but if they get another top 6 again, this will be a brilliant period for Luton Town. So to the final team not getting the top 6 back for me is Swansea. I think Swansea might be one of my biggest risks. And I remember doing a video with Matt SB not so long ago saying that Swansea was his wildcard team. And I said, that's a really good shout. And I have to look at their transfer business to think, wow. And remember for how good they were in the later part of their season. Obviously, had they not really struggled, in the beginning part of Russell Martin's tenure when they were right down the relegation zone, I think Swansea would have even improved their 14th place finish from last season there. And I think they will. I definitely think they'll get some consistency now. They're actually having some great players that come in from January stay with them now. The likes of Obafemi is still around, which I think he'll work very well with Joel Pirro. I mean, a strike partnership of Obafemi and Joel Pirro, that's very scary just by itself. And it can definitely shoot them right up the table. Harry Darling's a great signing at centre-back as well. I do think their defence could still be their kryptonite if Russell Martin continues with their high attacking possession-based football. But I'm hoping for their sake, with the players that they've got in, they can improve that. And their midfield, they need to get more control. And they managed to get that, replacing Flynn Downs, a big player, with Joe Allen with an abundance of experience, and he's returning to Swansea. So I think Swansea have done well, and I definitely think they will make a push, but I don't think the push will be big enough for top 6. I think there will be 6 other teams that just clinch top 6 ahead of Swansea. So now to the really exciting part of the top 6. 6th place for me is West Brom. Now, I look at their squad, and I've got to say, I think it's one of the best in the Championship, especially when you consider the signings of John Swift and Jed Wallace now added in their disposal with the talent they had from last year cropped up top of that as well. Obviously, last year, they don't want to talk about that. It was a disastrous season. Many of their big players who were expected to take them back to the Premier League severely underperformed. But I definitely think now will feel like that they need to really get their heads together. And I think having a new manager in Steve Bruce, pretty much now having his first full season with West Brom, could help things. He's got teams in the top 6 and promoted out of the Championship before he got promoted from the Championship twice with Birmingham and of course with Hull City. And he's also taken Aston Villa to the top 6 as well with a really high expected squad. And this team is definitely no exception to that as well with the talent they've got and the signings they've got in. I didn't even mention Yoksulu, right that left-hand side in an attacking position there. I think he'll be a really exciting transfer for the Championship. So I definitely think they've got some great potential. I think just the uncertainty of Steve Bruce and the consistency, especially with their attackers and their strikers, that I think is what might let them down and gain a bit higher up the table. But overall, I think with the great signings they made and what's expected of them, I think they have to at least finish 6th with this squad. If they don't finish top 6 again, it'll be an unbelievable couple of years of failure for West Brom. They have to get that act together now. Coming in at 5th place for me is Burnley. They are without a doubt the most difficult recently relegated team to predict. I feel Burnley will either storm the league and be outright favourites from the start, just miss out and, they have a couple of inconsistencies but they eventually get their act together, or it'll be a complete disaster. It's literally no in between, and I've gone for the second option where I think they may start okay but then they go through a tough period and then they build it up again. I think one thing to remember as well, which is something I've not even thought about with all of these teams, which championship teams are going to cope better with the long break of the season with the World Cup, and some championship teams have got more players involved than others as well, which could be a disadvantage to some championship clubs as well. But going back to Burnley's chances, I think the signings they recently made have really given me a little bit more faith in their season. Harwood Bellis, Egan Riley, 2 young defenders full of potential from the Man City youth squad. Maatson, I think, will be very reliable as a left back there. Josh Cullen, a good signing for me. Samuel Bastian, the midfielder, great signing as well. Scott Twine, without a doubt, the most exciting transfer for me. And I think he could be fantastic in that squad. And I definitely think he'll actually thrive well with Vincent Kompany. And I think with Vincent Kompany coming in, his first job, in English football and being a manager at least. So I definitely feel for me, he's got a lot to prove. And it's going to be interesting to see how he copes with the pressure. If he copes with it well, I think Burnley will be okay. Personally, I do feel with Kompany changing some things potentially, I think Burnley could find that quite disruptive, and I don't think, personally for me, they'll be storming the league. I think they'll go through peaks and troughs of form, and they'll finish 5th. Coming in at 4th place in the table is Middlesbrough. Now, Middlesbrough, I felt, for me, would be right up there in the top 2, and your pre-season friendlies, Middlesbrough, would suggest that you're ready for the season, but when I look at the business, you've done well with your defence, getting Darragh Lenihan in. You've done well to get Zach Steffen in as a goalkeeper. You've even got Liam Roberts as well to increase the competition for Luke Daniels in goal as well. You've got Ryan Giles in as another wing-back with Isaiah Jones, which I think both of them will be fantastic there. But who's going to lead the line? Who's going to be the striker for Middlesbrough? Is it going to be Watmore? Is it going to be Ikpeazu? Because I'm sorry, Ikpeazu's not going to score over 10 goals personally, in my opinion. I think Coburn's, for the future, but not number 1 striker there. Is it going to be Chuba Akpon, who's now returned from his loan spell? That didn't work out very well when you used him last time as well. If Middlesbrough get a really good striker before the transfer window ends, I may change my mind and say, you know what, the squad's ready to get promoted. But as of right now, the lack of vocal point, I think, may cost them. I think with Chris Wilder, perfect, manager for them, I think, with the experience he's got. He's already got a promotion from the Championship on his CV as well. So I do think Middlesbrough are nearly there. I just think they'll slightly fall short and finish in 4th place. Coming in at 3rd place in the table is Watford. Now, last time I predicted Watford in the Championship, I predicted them to win the Championship, which in the end it wasn't a terrible prediction because they finished 2nd place in the end, but for me, thinking that Watford were going to dominate the season was very bizarre for me, because Watford, I think this year have got the potential. They've got a majority of that squad who had played in the Championship those 2 years ago, so they definitely would know how to get out of the Championship again. And if it doesn't go well and they have a tough start to the season, Watford, and if they sack him already, it will completely disrupt things. And for me, they did cope with it quite well last time, getting rid of Ivic, in that season, and getting Munoz in, who was a miracle worker and got Watford eventually back into the top 2. I think if they do that, I think it'll be a little bit more erratic than that. And I've got to say, Watford guarantee at least third place for the fact they still got Ismail Assar and Emmanuel Dennis in the squad. If any one of them leaves, they do have the risk for me to even fall even lower for third. But for me, as of right now, with those two players still in the squad, which are without a doubt unbelievable quality, then I think Watford will be third place. So now to my top two. Second place, Sheffield United. You guys may be surprised about that, but I think Sheffield United will really respond this year. I think I'm going to see Sheffield United a bit similar to the response that Bournemouth made, last year when they got knocked out of the playoffs by the eventual playoff winners Brentford. They, went back into their new season and they really attacked it, and they did eventually finish in second. And I think Sheffield United will be more convincing. You've got to remember the record that Sheffield United had since Heckingbottom came in. He would have been right up there with Fulham with the amount of points that they managed to amass since he's come in as well. And I think their squad, a bit similar to Middlesbrough, is nearly perfect. I actually think the depth is edging Sheffield United for me a little bit more, and I think the positive momentum they had, I think, will definitely take Sheffield United a little bit more above Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough's form at the end of the season was a little bit more erratic and questionable, especially when the pressure was put on them there. For me, Sheffield United know how to deal with pressure. They were at a scenario where they nearly overturned a playoff semi-final where they were completely on the back foot in the first leg of that tie against Nottingham Forest. So they definitely got the great fundamentals there. The signings they made, Clark and Ahmedovich, I think are good signings in the defence position there. Tommy Doyle, I think, will be a great signing as well if he can do similarly to what he did with Cardiff City last year as well. Maybe a striker wouldn't hurt them. They may use Billy Sharp, who is quite reliable, but he is a year older. Ildayi could potentially step up. So if Billy Sharp's not going to be scoring, they may going to have to use one of the strikers that they did rely upon but didn't really deliver, like the Brewsters and the Indayis. But surely now, a bit similar to West Brom, they've had their excuse, for trying to deal with the emotional trauma of losing game after game in the Premier League. Now they've had their season, now they know, and they've got that confidence now. And I feel like the circumstances that they didn't get promoted, I think will get Sheffield United a fire in their belly and will shot them back to the Premier League within the second time of asking, in second place. So that means I'm going to be really boring and predict Norwich to win the Championship. I mean, who isn't predicting Norwich to win the Championship? I didn't 2 years ago, and I looked like a right idiot not doing so. So I'm not making that risk again. Maybe a bit more uncertain if they're going to finish first, especially if they've not got Daniel Farke anymore. I think his football was really suited to the Championship. Dean Smith, though, has had pretty good seasons in the Championship already, getting Aston Villa promoted from the Championship as well, where Steve Bruce had failed to do so there, so he's got one up against him with that front there. He did pretty well with Brentford as well in the Championship there, so I do think he's got a good quality managerial CV to cope for the Championship there. He really needs to put his stamp on the team though, and I do think that's what he lacked. He lacked a bit of authority and a bit of balls to actually get some particular tactics and a system to go his way, and I do think Norwich kind of accepted defeat almost, right early on. They need to get rid of that going into the season, and they tend to brush it off very, very well. Pukki's gone there and done it before. I expect him to get over 25 goals, and the fact that Sinani has left Huddersfield and now will be involved in Norwich, I think will be a really big plus for Norwich as well. Hayden coming in will be decent for experience in around that centre defensive mid position there. Oh no, Hernandez could have a bigger role when he did pretty well with Birmingham in January as well. You could have see the likes of Hugo being involved, potentially Sargent potentially doing well and being involved at one stage. Rashia, who looked alright at stages last year, stats wise he didn't do so well, but definitely with the value he's got, will definitely be a player you wouldn't expect to see in the Championship. Max Aarons always does very, very well in right back in the Championship as well. Those same hitting players that got Norwich promoted those years ago, most of them are still around, including the likes of Todd Cantwell, and they're getting, some new players in with a great potential as well, like Gabriel Sara. So for me, I think Norwich's squad is the most prepared, most high in quality and most in depth, and the most equipped to get promoted from the Championship as champions. So guys, on the left hand side of the screen are my 1 to 24 table predictions of the Championship. Let me know what you think of them in the comments down below, and please predict your predictions in the comments down below as well. We're interested to see a really good amount of debate and differing tables from all of you guys. We'll react to all of those comments and predictions at the end of the season, and we'll potentially see which one of our predictions gets the biggest laugh. It will most likely be mine, but we're supposed to, try our best to try and predict the season. It's not going to be alright, but we'll try our best, that's for sure. So guys, that wraps it up for today. If you guys enjoyed the video, please give the video a like. It just tremendously helps the channel. A bit of a longer video as well, so I hope you enjoyed it. Please do hit the subscribe button, it does really help the channel, and please also share the channel too. That really helps the growth of this channel too. Thank you guys so much for watching, guys. The legendary episode of this video. And as always, I'll see you guys soon. Take care, everyone.